So it kind of felt like we were just, like a righteous extension of the world. It was very dark. At that point, I was very much done with God. I contemplated suicide a lot because it felt like there's no point to this. It's like, though I was so done with God, God wasn't done with me. Hi, I'm Dylan. I'm 24 years old. I'm a final year student at BCU. I'm studying engineering, and I'd like to share my testimony about how I met Christ. I grew up in a very, very Christian home. My mom sang in a choir, and even when she was in choir, she was pregnant with me. And so I was definitely in that church environment for my whole life, praying every morning, praying before going to bed, making sure that I read my Bible. Like, I remember when I was like 7, my mom got me this like Bible with all these pictures, and she wrote me this long note about like how I have to, meditate on the word day and night. So my upbringing was very much about Christ, Jesus, watching movies about Jesus and the 12 disciples. It was very much deeply into that. And I would say that I enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. I did like going to church because I would see my friends. Most of my friends were in the church. So it was a really cool space to grow up in. And I really enjoyed that. Even though I grew up in a Christian home, the time that I really decided to give my life to the Lord, I was about 14. That's when that's when I actually said the Lord's Prayer. And I, really dedicated myself to reading the word. I dedicated myself to prayer. But even in doing that, I didn't understand the whole aspect of like surrendering your life and carrying your cross. So I just thought that, you could just do whatever, but as long as you prayed, as long as you read your Bible, you were good. And I would say that I would actually dodge anything that was related to obedience and holiness, because I thought it was for like the older Christians, and I was very young at the time. So though I would pray a lot and I would read my word and I would really listen to sermons a lot, like every day, I would almost kind of ignore certain things. So I would kind of pick and choose. Though I gave my life to Christ and I believed in him a lot, there were certain things that I wouldn't surrender to him like that. And I think when I was about 20, that was a breaking point for me, where I felt like I wasn't really happy with what I was seeing in being a Christian, and I completely left the church. And I think I didn't go to church for like 3 months, and it was a very dark time, because it was this piece of my life that I had dedicated so many years into, and now that thing is gone. I reached a point where even just going to church, that was like, yeah, I spent time with God. And so not being in church just felt so weird to me and foreign. But at the same time, I was so angry with God. I was so disappointed that it felt like, well, maybe this God thing isn't for me. I felt like, though I was born into this and though I grew up listening to the word, I felt like maybe this isn't really for me. And it was quite a dark season, to be honest. It was very dark. At that point, I was very much done with God. I would tell him in my heart, like, this is it for me. I'm done being a Christian. I've tried it for the 20 years of my life. I've done things as I thought you would want it to be, and I wasn't happy with it. During that time, I wasn't very much happy with what I'd seen and with the way that, Jesus was represented. And so I left completely, because I reached a point where I just wasn't really seeing my life change. I wasn't growing in the faith, and the people around me, I wasn't seeing any growth in them. So it kind of felt like we were just, like a righteous extension of the world in a way. So we were just like the people in the world. We would just pray about it. And so once I noticed that, I realized that, like, I'm not any different. I don't really feel like I'm a Christian. I just pray about my sins and stuff like that. But I probably sin as most as my friends in the world. So what am I really doing here? And I think that was a point where I realized that it was time for me to leave church. For me, I felt like I just wanted to leave church in general. I didn't want to just go to another church. I felt like all churches were that way. So I was completely done with church in general, and I didn't want nothing to do with it. I thought about becoming an atheist, but it would have been hard, because all my life I'd seen God move. I'd seen the manifestation of the presence of God. So it would have been very hard for me to be an atheist. I just didn't want to be in the church, I guess. So it would have been a weird thing for me. But 3 months of not being in the church, it was a very dark season. It was very dark. I would just get angry over the smallest things. I would just have fits of rage. I'd stay in my room. I'd stay isolated. Like, I was just very different. And I remember my mom would say she was scared of me, which I've never heard ever. My mom was scared of me. She wouldn't talk to me. Like, she wouldn't talk to me because she was afraid to talk to me about anything. My brother, he would tell me, "Oh, you've changed," but I wouldn't take it any seriously, because like when your older brother tells you you've changed, you're like, "Oh, okay, cool, whatever." But it was a dark season. It was very dark, and I was angry at God. I was angry at the world. I was angry at everything. And so I preferred to just stay in my room and just stay in there for hours and just sit there and just do nothing. And so that period of isolation was something that I felt was needed for me, because I felt like, what am I going to do out there? I know that the world is bad, but then in my opinion, I felt like the church is bad too. So what's the point? Am I just going to go to work and just make money? So it was a very dark season. I definitely contemplated suicide a lot, because it felt like there's no point to this. Like, you couldn't talk about God to me. At the time, my older brother, who's a deacon, he lived with me, and it was very hard to live with him because, for those who know him, he's very passionate, extremely passionate about God. I'm talking waking up at 4 a.m. to pray, and my room is here, his room is there. So imagine hearing somebody speaking in tongues at 4 a.m. and you're at a point where you're not trying to hear anything about God. It was hard. It was really tough. And there was a lot of tension between us, because he kept trying to preach to me. And I would tell him, "Don't talk to me about God. I don't want to hear it." And so there was a lot of tension between us, because looking back now, he was trying to look out for me. But I had a lot of hatred for God, and I had a lot of hatred for the things of God. And it was a very hard season. And then eventually one day, my older brother, he came into my room and he said, "Dylan, can I please just pray for you just one time?" And when he did, I was like, okay, one prayer. And then after that, you leave me alone. Don't ever preach to me. Don't ever talk to me about God. Don't ever utter the name Jesus to me, because it's going to get real. I will fight you. We will fight, and it's going to get real, and you're not going to be happy. And so he prayed for me, and something happened. I felt peace after he prayed. And then he asked me, "Okay, Dylan, I want you to come to one service to my church, just one service." Bringing it back to when my brother decided to pray for me, when I let him pray for me, and I felt that peace, he really asked me, he pleaded actually, he said, "Okay, just one service. One service. If you don't like it, I'll leave you alone. We won't talk about this ever again." And I was like, okay, that's fine. One service, and then that's it. Don't talk to me about Jesus. Don't bring me no Jesus stuff. If you do, we're going to fight. And that's going to be it for us. Like, we're going to be very, very distant brothers. And then that's going to be the case. And so I came to church that Sunday. I really wanted to be late. I wanted to be like an hour late, but somehow I woke up like just on time. So I didn't have, like, when you wake up and you want to go back to sleep, but you can't, because you're just like, nah, I have to do this. So I get ready and I'm just dragging my feet, put on a suit, and just like, okay, I guess I have to do this, because I said I was gonna do it. And I get to this church, and like, I get in there, and I think praise is happening, and I'm trying not to be seen by anybody, so I'm just like, yeah, okay. I try to sit at the back actually, so that no one sees me, but somehow there's literally a chair like in the middle rows, like kind of at the front, and they're like, "Yeah, you can sit right there." And I'm like, "I don't want to sit there." And they're like, no, go sit right there. And I'm like, fantastic. And so I sit there, and praise was really good, but I think that what hit me the most was the worship, because I think for those 3 months of not going to church, I think I was saying a lot of bad things to God. I was saying a lot of hateful things to God. And so I think hearing worship for the first time in so long, it felt weird, because I spent months just telling God, "I hate you, I hate church, I hate Christians, I hate Christianity, I hate all this." And then they're singing, "We love you, Lord," and things like that. And it just felt weird. I felt like, oh, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. I kind of just closed my eyes, and I didn't sing along, but I just closed my eyes, and I would just contemplate the words that they were singing. And then after contemplating the words that they were singing, something happened. It was weird, but because my eyes were closed and I was just kind of just meditating on the words that were being sung. And then I felt this presence. It was like, I don't know how I can explain it, but it was like someone came, obviously someone 10 times my size, came, hugged me really, really tight, like very tightly. But it wasn't like I was being suffocated, but it felt more like very peaceful and very warm. And at that moment, I felt like so much peace, and I was like, it doesn't make any sense. I spent all this time saying very, very bad things to God. And why am I feeling this comfort, this peace, this love? It makes no sense. And I didn't want to open my eyes, but the more I would just contemplate on the words that were being sung, it would just get tighter, and it just felt like being wrapped up in like a really thick blanket. That's the best way I can, if I could just picture that, that's what I would say. It was like someone had wrapped a blanket around me, and it was like a really thick one. It was warm, and I felt so much peace. And in that moment, like all the hatred that I had for God, all the hatred that I had for church, all the hatred that I had, for the old church that I've been to, it was just leaving. And it was like all the things that I said to God in my heart, because I never said it out loud, but I said it in my heart a lot, in my mind. All those things that I said, it's like it didn't matter. It was almost like he wasn't offended. It was almost like, yeah, you said all these things, but you're still mine, and I'm not done with you. Because most of my complaints and my, the wrong things that I would say to God was, I would say, I'm done with you. I'm done with this. I'm so done with you. And it's weird to say that to God because you're technically praying, but I would tell him, yeah, I'm done with you. But during that service, I don't know what happened. Like the presence of God was so thick, and I'm not really one of those people that I don't like to fall. I kind of stay away from that stuff. Like, I guess it's my ego. But that day when the presence of God came and I felt that peace all around me, I just knew, okay, I guess I need to be here. I knew in my spirit I needed to be here, but I was still reluctant. And I was like, okay, this was cool. That was all right, but I'm not coming back. So it gets to the sermon, and the pastor starts preaching. And for the first time ever in 20 years, the pastor's preaching and he's giving a really good word, and I start crying. I've never cried in church. That's never been my thing. But as he's preaching, I'm crying. And this is why I wish I was sitting at the back so no one would have seen me. But I'm kind of at the front, and I'm crying tears, and he's preaching. So I had to put my head down like this, and I'm like, yeah, great. And I'm trying to wipe him as fast as I can so I don't draw attention to myself. And when you're about to start sobbing, and that was going to happen, so I had to hold my breath, yeah, amen. And so, yeah, it happened. And so I'm crying, and I'm trying to hide it. I'm just wiping the tears away. I'm like, yeah, amen, I receive. But it was just things that had never happened before were happening. And I was like, man, what is it about this church? What did they do? And I'm thinking, wow, okay, this is cool. This is amazing. But in my mind, I'm still trying to be arrogant. I have my ego up to the ceiling. So I'm like, yeah, this was a great service, but I'm not trying to be a part of what you guys are doing. I'm not trying to be a part of this. So as soon as the service is done, because they didn't announce is there a new person here? So I was happy about that. So that was my window to just bounce. So the service is about to be finished. I get myself together, and then I get ready to go. So yeah, the service is over, and I'm getting ready to leave. And then someone whispers to the pastor, and then he goes, wait, everyone stop. And he's like, because my brother who's at this church, I think he's one of the deacons, and he was like, so-and-so's brother's here. His name is Dylan. He's right there. Pointed at me right there, in the middle. And I just see next just turn hey. And I'm like, oh, no. I just see people smiling at me, just people just so happy to see me, they know me. But it was just so weird. And it was beautiful. I felt so much love that day. And I just felt so much peace. But I still didn't want to come back. I was like, yeah, this is way too good to be true. They must be putting up a really good act. Maybe they just noticed there's a new person. So they were like, okay, let's double up on the love because there's a new guy here. So let's make sure he stays. That was probably one of the best services that I attended. but my heart was still at that place where, I just didn't feel like, okay, this is it, because I said so many angry things at God that I'm sure I meant these things, right? So I'm done with God. So yeah, this was a great service, but I already told God I'm done with him. So though the service was amazing, I'm done. But I think that was literally that point of contact. And ever since then, I just kept thinking about that service over and over again. And even when I would go home, I would go back to all that darkness and all that anger. But then I would think back like, man, when I was at that church, I wasn't angry. I didn't feel that rage. I didn't feel that hot fire in my chest that I would feel every single day. I actually felt so free. And though I had so much arrogance at that time, and I was like, oh, but I don't want to come back and greet all these people and smile and stuff like that. I want to be in my own corner and be angry. I just kept longing for that peace because it just felt so right. And so I came back, and then one service turned into 2 services and 3 services. And then eventually I started opening up to just a few people. And I really enjoyed going to, there was a time when they had this thing called cell groups where you would, it was like you would meet with a certain number of believers and you would fellowship with them. And I remember because I was just fresh and like I wasn't really for the gimmicks. I would just ask as many questions. I would say it how it was. I would say what I agreed with. I would say what I didn't agree with. I was really trying to offend people, but they were so receptive to what I had to say. Like I was trying to throw people off, but they were like, nah, we want to hear you. We want to hear what you think, and we want to teach you too. And that was so different. I guess I saw a side of Jesus that I'd never really seen before. And that was really something that stayed with me for a long time. There's one member of this church, I'm not going to say her name, but this was like the first time I attended one of the prayer services. I think at the time it was like 3 hours long, and I remember showing up and like the prayer service was so long. I was like, man, how do they pray like this? At the end of the service, I was tired. I was like, how can people pray that long? And I'm seeing this one member, and she was just full of energy. Like, she wasn't exhausted. I was exhausted. I was like, because I don't pray like this. And she greets me, and she's so happy. She's so vibrant. She's just so full of life after 3-hour prayer. And I look at her, and I'm like, man, like, you're really vibrant. You're really energetic. You are. And she was like, yeah, I just love Jesus. And when she said that, it just kind of just went through me. I was like, whoa. Because I looked at her in her eye when she said that, and she wasn't lying. Like, she meant it. And I was like, you can really love Jesus like that? Like, to the point where it's like, that's your real life? That's real? And I think it was that conversation that made me think, you know what? I want some of this. I want to experience that joy, that excitement. I've never seen someone be so excited about prayer, especially for that many hours. Usually, I'd fall asleep or something like that. But to see people so dedicated to being in the presence of God, I was like, okay, I'm definitely missing something here. And so I kept showing up. I kept asking questions. I kept, being open about my struggles, about my sins. I was open about everything, really. And I think that once I started doing that, I felt so much weight being lifted off my shoulders. And it became more and more easy to love Jesus. It became more and more easy to surrender to him. And I think that for the longest, I really struggled with carrying my cross and denying myself and really living for Jesus, even if it's not popular. I think for me, when I was younger, I would follow Jesus until I didn't feel like it. And I think that one thing I really picked up from this church is that, they're on this Jesus thing 24/7, good season, bad seasons, whether it's hot or cold, whether it's popular or not, it's Jesus 24/7. And I knew I wanted to be a part of that. And so I think that that's definitely how I've managed to, would I say meet Jesus or rededicate my life to him? I'll say rededicate my life to him. And once I started, approaching him like that, I've experienced so much of his favor, so much of his love. It became so much easier for me to forgive other people. Forgiveness was something that I struggled with a lot. But I think that as I really opened up to him and as I really exposed myself to really obeying Christ, God, as you should, you really experience a lot of benefits from that. And I'd say, yeah, that would be my story, my testimony. And it's still ongoing. It's not the end, but I'd say that that's where I am. That's where I'm at, and I'm very happy.
What was the message in the service that made you join?
I can't really remember it word for word, but it was like he was with the message that he was preaching. It was like he was talking about me, like he was literally exposing my entire situation. And in that situation, it was mainly the fact that I was running from God. You know, I was running from him. I didn't want nothing to do with him. And he kept picking at that. Like, he really just kept poking that, like, over and over again. Like, I was wishing, man, let him just talk about something else. But he just kept hitting that nail, and it was like he'd hit it over and over and over again. And I was like, man, this was tough. Like, it was tough to just sit there and just listen, because he was just, it was like God had shown him my life, what I was going through, and he was just reading it off a script, like, oh, okay, Dylan's going through this, he's going through that, let me talk about it. And it was just hard. I was like, man, like, can you talk about something else? I don't know, talk about blessings or something. Like, don't expose me like this. And it was hard. It was really hard. And it was hard to pretend it wasn't about me. Because I think a lot of times for me, when a preacher would talk about something real, I would always kind of just throw it off and be like, yeah, mate, it's about someone else. It's not about me. And, you know, I'd be like, yeah, I don't struggle with that, so surely it's not about me. But this was one of the first times that a preacher that I don't know was talking about everything I was struggling with in detail, like to the T. And it was like I couldn't hide at that point. It was like I think I was crying because I felt seen. I was crying because though I was saying a lot of, you know, angry things at God, it was like, yeah, but I'm still here though. You know, I ain't done with you. I'm still involved in your life. I'm still in the details of your life. And I guess the reason why I started crying was because, like, though I was so done with God, God wasn't done with me. And he wasn't done with the details, the small details of my life. He wasn't done with the painful parts of my life. He wasn't dismissive about these things. You know, he actually cared about that. And I guess that's why I broke. And, you know, I felt like this armor of, like, resistance that I had towards God, it just fell. It was just literally broken in a million pieces. And I think that's the reason why I experienced that peace during worship, and why I kept feeling that peace over and over again every time I came back. Because I think when I would show up, it was like, you know what? Yeah, I don't like you, but I want to be here and I need you. And I think that when I approached God like that, like, it was almost like he understood where I was coming from, and he still wanted to do something with me. He still wanted to be a part of me. And so that's why that's why I kind of broke and had my moment. What advice would I give? Oh, man. Don't dismiss people who are trying to speak life into your situation. They definitely care. It may seem like they're trying to shove Jesus down into your throat, and it may seem like God is dismissive about your pain and about your disappointments. It may feel like God does not care and he just wants you to just praise him, but he does care. Like, he cares a lot. And for those that are in that situation, like, I would really just say, just don't give up. Like, don't give up so easily. I know it seems dark and it looks really, really hard, and it seems like it doesn't make sense. Like, God doesn't make sense, the world doesn't make sense, and you don't have a place in this world, and you feel like, you know what, you'd be better off just leaving. That's such a lie. Like, that is definitely a lie. That's definitely from the enemy, and you don't want to listen to that voice. You want to run to the light. And even though it may seem like you failed, even though it may seem like it didn't work out the last time, don't give up on Jesus. Like, definitely don't. Hey everyone, I'm Dylan, and this is Share It.